Hello everyone, David Lang here from the Holy Land of Israel with my weekly fireside chat. Hope you're all doing okay. Today I want to go into the thorny topic of freedom of speech and use a couple of news items to illustrate my point and where I stand on this and promote some sort of discussion on it. It's a very thorny issue, and I'm sure many of you who are watching this, although you might have very similar views when it comes to Israel and things of that nature, might have very divergent opinions when it comes to freedom of speech and what speech should be allowed, what speech, if any, shouldn't be allowed. In order to discuss this, I want to first go back to a news item. I mean, for the last few weeks, I've been speaking about a very vile anti-Semite called Angelo John Gage. This white nationalist guy. I did a midweek, not fireside chat, but I did a midweek video responding to a video that he had done. And he looks like he's been plotting some sort of revolution. He's spoken about being ready to die for the cause. So I flagged even the authorities to have a look at this guy. He came out with a video this week with a guy called Adam Green. Adam Green is also a very vile anti-Semite. Although Adam Green, if you look at him with the long hair and he looks like he hasn't showered in a number of days or weeks, you'd think he was far left rather than far right. But he happens to be far right, and he had this Angelo on his YouTube channel. And as part of their discussion, they basically attacked me as the person that had sort of, let's say, put the heat on this Angelo guy, and I'm very proud of that, by the way. And as part of what they were saying, I think it was Adam Green said that I am painful to watch and low IQ, which I found pretty funny. Painful to watch, I'm really glad anti-Semites would find me painful to watch. In fact, my purpose in calling out to anti-Semites is to make them uncomfortable and to let them enter a world of pain. Really, I'm not threatening violence here, but I want things to be uncomfortable for them. I want them not to go ahead and, they've got freedom of speech, but at the same time, I've got freedom of speech. And my philosophy here is to basically allow them to have their freedom of speech, but use their freedom of speech against them. I'm just trying to think of a sporting analogy because I know that many Americans are watching, so maybe I should talk about NFL, although I don't know much about it. But I think of Aussie rules football, but a number of sports where there's tackling. So if someone goes in hard against you, they're running hard to tackle you, another player from the other team sometimes can use that momentum against them and, they fling them onto the ground. And that's kind of the analogy I'm looking for here. I want to use their momentum, their freedom of speech, in propagating hate speech against them. I want to expose it. I want to expose it to reasonable people. You see, their hate speech is intended mostly for their choir, their horrible, disgusting choir of scum and villainy. And they don't like it when someone like me comes along and exposes it to thinking, reasonable, moral individuals. Because otherwise you'd think that they would be happy that I'm disseminating their posts. But no, they're not. They always hate it. They always attack me. So I actually am not a proponent of shutting down necessarily these people unless it crosses that boundary between just speech, hate speech, and where they're inciting violence and murder. And there is a fine line there, I have to admit. And I also don't necessarily like it when someone will report, for instance, a Twitter account and then have all these posts suspended, because I prefer to use their post against them. I think it's much more effective. And of course, every time they're shut down, they say, look, it's true, the Jews own the world, etc., etc. I've got to admit, it's sometimes not so black and white and it can be a little bit tricky, but that's just my personal point of view here. And what I do object to mostly is when you have blue check marks, for instance, on social media. Blue check mark is a verified account, and it sort of gives them this air of legitimacy, as if they're somehow important and legitimate. This Angelo John Gage, he has a blue check mark on Twitter, and that's I have a big problem with. No one should have like that. No anti-Semite or someone promoting violence or genocide, like in the case of the Iranian Khomeini, who's also a blue checkmark Twitter account, you know, those blue check marks should be repudiated. They should be taken down. So that's more my point. And some of their posts should be like flagged in some way, just like on Facebook. Facebook started flagging posts which were fake news. And I'm not sure, maybe Twitter has, I don't remember. But there should be some flagging of certain posts which are, you know, for instance, contravening the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, because that can be a very powerful educational tool instead of just necessarily taking down the posts. Again, this is a very controversial topic, and I don't expect all of you to agree. I just want to put out these viewpoints out there. Which leads into another news item, which is I was one of the first, if not the first person to report about a talk that was going to happen at San Francisco State University. Ahmed, I think it's the Arab and Muslim Ethnic and Diversity group, something along those lines. They've invited a Palestinian terrorist called Leila Khaled. Leila Khaled, you've probably seen the photo of her with the rifle. She was an iconic terrorist of the late 60s, early 70s for the Palestinians, one of the early hijackers. Because, you know, we know that the Palestinians brought hijacking into vogue. And she's an unrepentant terrorist, okay? So I believe in repentance, but she doesn't, you know, she still supports violence against Israelis and, yeah, maybe others as well. And so San Francisco State University, this group there, headed by some, I think, Palestinian or Arab professor, have invited her as a featured speaker, which really rubbed me and a lot of people the wrong way. By the way, I just want to, as an aside, point out that, as I mentioned, I think I was one of the first to report this, and then, you know, Jerusalem Post, Al Jazeera, Times of Israel, and the like have reported it in their usual true form, which is basically just reporting it as if it was their scoop, without any kind of acknowledgement. And I just, the reason I'm mentioning this is I want to give a shout out to a journalist called Aaron Bandler from the Jewish Journal, who always does the right thing. And if it's me or someone else that is the first to report something, he attributes his sources. Come on, where's the let's say the courtesy in journalism these days? It's like ambulance chasing journalism. Every website wants to rush to be the first, and if they're not the first, they want to kind of proclaim themselves as the first. Come on, guys, you can do better than that. Okay, be that as it may, so they are going to feature her in late September, this unrepentant terrorist. And by the way, the event, the way it's being promoted, has a picture of her with the rifle. You can see it in the actual promotional posters on Facebook and perhaps even on campus, for all I know. And anyway, so I've implored readers of Israeli Cool to contact the Chancellor and the President of SFSU. And we got a response. Many wrote to me and told me they got a response from President Lynn Mahoney, and I'm just going to read it now and address it. So she says, "Thanks for contacting me. It is not uncommon for professors to invite speakers to address classes and invite the public to attend in some circumstances. This event is being held jointly by professors from 2 departments, and Ms. Khaled is one of several panel speakers. Invitation to a public figure to speak to a class should not be construed as an endorsement of their point of view. Higher education and the college experience are an opportunity to hear divergent ideas, viewpoints, and accounts of life experiences. An important outcome of the college experience is to learn to think critically and come to independent, personal conclusions about events of local and global importance. San Francisco State University supports academic freedom, including the freedom to engage in intellectual debate, to express individual viewpoints, and to challenge the viewpoints of others without fear of retaliation or censorship. A university is a marketplace of ideas, and SF State supports the rights of all individuals to express their viewpoints and other speech protected by law, even when those viewpoints may be controversial. We also strive to be welcoming and nurturing campus for students from a variety of ethnic, cultural, and socio-economic backgrounds. We recognize that the exercise of free speech and academic freedom can result in discomfort or pain for others. We have systems in place to support our students, including our Division of Diversity and Community Inclusion. Sincerely, Lynn Mahoney." Wow, that had almost every cliche in the book, except I'm surprised you didn't mention safe spaces in that. Someone to address this. Okay, so it's all well and good to talk about freedom of speech and the marketplace of ideas, but let's look at the event for a second. This isn't a debate where there's going to be a marketplace of ideas. And they say by hosting this, they're not really endorsing it. But this is going to be, by virtue of Ahmed running it and the professor who's very anti-Israel inviting her. And by the way, there are other people on the panel who are also very anti-Israel. This is going to be a one-sided brainwashing session. And my problem with this is not necessarily that Leila Khalid is going to speak somewhere. Okay, if she was going to speak in some garage somewhere, I'm not going to try to shut that down necessarily. She's being, let's say, San Francisco State University are hosting her. And whatever President Lynn Mahoney says, whether it's an endorsement or not, they're giving her a platform. Again, it's not a debate, a marketplace of ideas. She's going to basically be brainwashing these already brainwashed college students, and that's where my problem is. And again, she promotes terrorism, and this is I draw the line here. Like, I don't think she should be hosted by San Francisco State University, and if they are going to have her speak, there should be other divergent opinions. This is going to be a one-sided pro-terror talk. We have to draw the line. Now, I don't believe all ideas are equal. The problem now is that all ideas are being kind of put into this marketplace of ideas as legitimate. I'm sorry, not all ideas are legitimate. As I mentioned in my blog post on this, which I posted about 10 minutes before this chat, would she invite a pedophile to talk? Is that okay? Marketplace of ideas. We don't believe in censorship. What about a neo-Nazi? Where do you draw the line? We have to draw lines. I'm sorry, in this woke generation, there are no lines being drawn. Anyone can do whatever they want, and it's not cool to say that that's wrong. See, this is why I believe in absolute morality. Because relative morality does not work. Relative morality, besides the fact that I actually happen to believe in God, I know not all of you do. I happen to believe, and beliefs are beliefs. You can't force anyone to believe anything. But like, the problem with relative morality is one person's morality is another person's crime or immoral notion. And there are certain things which are wrong. But so many people now are being taught that not only are they right, but they're more right than other ideas. So these college students are being shown this terrorist with that, sexy photo. It's not sexy at all, but you know what I'm saying, this kind of iconic photo. It shows a woman empowered with a rifle, and she's fighting back the oppressed against the oppressor. This is the framing of this whole thing, and that's my problem. This isn't a marketplace of ideas. This is like a monopoly of ideas. And again, have her on campus if you want, but then have the opposing point of view. Have some victims of terrorism present the idea. And this is the problem. And this is why we have this woke generation at the moment. You have this whole context of you have this BLM riots. Again, I'm for Black Lives Mattering as a concept, but not the organization. But you have this sort of framing that resistance is good and the oppressed versus the oppressor. And this is part of it. This is no coincidence that she's being invited now. Also at this time when the haters are trying to link BLM with the Palestinian so-called cause. So I'm for, as I mentioned before, as a concept, freedom of speech, but there have to be limits on it. When you're inciting to murder, that's a limit. And again, I don't see this as a freedom of speech issue. This is about, it's sort of like what I said before, but the Twitter putting the blue check mark. This is San Francisco State University metaphorically giving Leila Khalid, the terrorist, a blue check mark. She's not being interviewed by President Lynn Mahoney saying, listen, we're bringing this speaker. Just so you know, this is someone who's controversial. She brought some grenades onto airplanes. She was a hijacker. She promotes violence against Israeli civilians. That's not how she's going to be introduced. The dice are going to be loaded. This isn't, again, a marketplace of ideas. So this, from my point of view, Lynn Mahoney, this was an absolute cop-out. And we need to call her out on this, as I have done. Some of you might say, well, David, you're overreacting. What do we have to be afraid of? You have the marketplace of ideas. Let her talk. Yeah, let her talk somewhere else. Don't make it easy for her. Don't present her point of view as somehow legitimate. It's not legitimate. Any point of view like that, promoting murder and violence, is not legitimate. And I'm going to stand by that. That's inciting violence. So freedom of speech, again, cannot be an unfettered right. I believe there have to be certain limits on it. Now, I do realize there can be a slippery slope to that in terms of who's going to adjudicate this. But I believe there is a way to do it. And again, if you want her to speak, then at least provide the opposing point of view against terrorism. But to have this organization, this Ahmed organization, which are going to present her as a hero, a heroine, it's not right. It's dangerous. And we see college students, especially in the States, at the moment, they're being absolutely brainwashed. And this is why I'm very fearful for the future of our kids, because they're being taught all the wrong things. Anyway, this is one of those topics. I mean, I'm always interested in what you have to say, but I do believe that there's going to be quite a, some divergent opinions on this. But hopefully I explained why I believe what I believe. Again, I'm for freedom of speech, but some speech is more equal than others. There are some things we should never tolerate. And if you still believe in freedom of speech and people should talk, there's a difference between giving someone an unfettered platform and somehow, even though if you say you're not endorsing them, you kind of are. You kind of are. And like the blue check mark on Twitter, take away them as having some sort of air of credibility. Let them say what they want to say. But then again, people like me and other freedom-loving people and people who hate violence and hate, we then can use their speech against them. And that's why I'm not for full censorship, but at the same time, I'm not for anything goes as equal ideas. Anyway, that's what I had to say this week. Again, always interested in what you have to say, and hopefully I will see you all and speak to you all this time next week. Shabbat Shalom and have a great weekend, everyone.